How New Orleans Saints defensive end and former first-round selection Payton Turner's return to the field this season helped to rejuvenate the New Orleans Saints pass rush in 2022. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into Louisiana Sports Writers Association's #2 sports podcast in the great state of Louisiana, Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. On Twitter, you can find me every day over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints, even throughout the off season. Very glad to be here with you on this Thursday episode. On today's episode, we're going to talk about 5 New Orleans Saints that need to be as advertised in 2022 for the team to find success. But first, I want to discuss Payton Turner. Payton Turner, the Saints' former first-round pick last season out of Houston, medically cleared. And that's huge news for the New Orleans Saints because with Payton Turner as a part of your defensive line, all of a sudden the sack production, your pressure production against quarterbacks, as well as your disruption in the backfield in the run game get a big-time boost as long as Payton Turner can be on the field. And if Payton Turner is healthy, and if Payton Turner can continue to produce at the level that he was producing in the few games that we saw him last season, then all of a sudden this New Orleans Saints defensive line's pass rush production and defensive line production shoot way, way up. So he ends up making a very big difference for the New Orleans Saints just as a rotational piece, not even talking about him as a potential starter. So first, we'll start off with a look at Payton Turner's tweet here. So we're going to look at it on Twitter. I'll read it to you if you're listening on the audio side. It's been a long road to recovery. I had pretty major shoulder surgery last November and didn't quite have the rookie year that I wanted. But big shout out to everybody that stayed down with me and helped me get to this point. Blessed to say that I have been, and then in all caps, cleared. Threw out a couple of emojis there for good measure as well. By the way, if you ever want to see your tweets here on the show or hear your tweets read here on the show, tweet me at Ross Jackson Nola, but also include the hashtag LO Saints. Payton Turner did not include that hashtag. Still got on the show. So that just shows you how important Payton Turner is. No, I'm just joking. But when you look at what it is that Payton Turner did during the 2021 season and the very, very small sample size that we got the opportunity to see from him, which were actually just weeks like 2 through 5 and then week 9 against the Atlanta Falcons, you could see where the production could come from. 111 total pass rushing snaps in 2021. Not a lot, right? He only had 144 total as it all like comes down. So that's like what, 4 games worth of a usual, from start to finish edge rusher snaps, basically. 10 total pressures. He had 1 sack, 2 hits on the quarterback, 7 hurries as well. Now that's 10 total pressures over 111 pass rushing snaps. It's a 9% pass rushing pressure percentage. That's big. That's really, really nice. I mean, that's basically a pressure every 11 plays or so. And it's going to be hard to maintain that. He had a huge game against the Carolina Panthers, his first game out, and now he has to be able to hit the field and show that that wasn't just kind of a fluke, right? Beginner's luck, whatever you want to call it, that's just the disruptive player that he is when he's out on the field and when he's healthy. He has to prove that. But if he can, that's huge, huge benefit for you if you're a New Orleans Saints team that trudged its way to crossing 40 sacks in 2021. They've done that at pretty much every season since 2017, and they did it just in time before the 17th game, which is important to highlight, right? It wasn't just the 17th game that got them there. They ended with 46 sacks, but they crossed the 40 sack threshold by the 16th game. So you add on the fact that Payton Turner now coming back to this lineup means that you have a rotation of Cam Jordan, hopefully Marcus Davenport, Payton Turner, Carl Granderson, who's generated some good pressure and continued to develop. Maybe Taco Charlton gets involved there. Tono Passanio was a big-time playmaker. No, I don't want to call him a playmaker, but he was a big-time disruptor for the New Orleans Saints on the defensive line before his injury last season as well. So you have now this rotation that's available to you, which means that you have the ability to impact games a little bit sooner than you were able to impact games last year, where you at least had a 6-game hold while David Onyemata was out. Now, all of a sudden, if you've got Payton Turner, who's medically cleared and ready to go just in time for training camp, which is fantastic because he flashed a lot during training camp last year. You look at that, and then you have, hopefully Marcus Davenport will have a similar trajectory or become available at some point during training camp. David Onyemata is starting the season week 1. Tano Passanio should be back. Cam Jordan, of course, is your big-time disruptor. I know it took him a little bit of time last year to really get rolling, but he did. And so you put all of that together, and if you're able to start with the full band week 1, that's a huge, huge benefit for you, especially going up against a weak offensive line like the Atlanta Falcons to open up the season. So I think that the idea of getting Payton Turner back is one that Saints fans should be excited about. And I've seen a lot of Saints fans excited about it. It's warranted. There's warrant for caution as well, just in terms of the expectation, because again, Payton Turner still has to prove something. He's got to prove that he can stay healthy. I believe that he can do that, but he has to show that, right? And I think people are going to ask questions about, okay, or have their reservations around like, okay, yes, he can be impactful. He can be disruptive when he's on the field. He just has to be on the field. And then you look at like the reverse of that, and then there are some of those players that the only thing they can do is be on the field, right? So you pick your poison in terms of what it is that you can do, but you love what Payton Turner does when he's on the field. You just want to see him on the field more. And don't get it twisted. He wants to be on the field more than anyone wants to see him on the field, right? He wants to be out there too. So I think that all of these things, and maybe with the addition of Matt Rhea and the director of sports science, I'd be really interested in talking to Payton about how Coach Rhea, helped and what changed, and if anything changed in his rehabilitation process, or did he join too late in that process or whatever. I'd be really interested to see if anything shifted once Matt Rhea showed up. But for the Saints, Dennis Allen has already talked about, getting Michael Thomas back is like getting a 3rd first-round pick, as they had 2 first-round picks in the draft of Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. If you get Payton Turner back and he actually plays a full season and he's able to be this disruptive pass rusher for you, again, a pressure every 11 snaps is going to be pretty hard to maintain, don't get me wrong, but if he's able to put together some fraction of that to where he's getting multiple pressures in a game. He had 4 pressures against the Carolina Panthers, a sack and 3 hurries. He also had 6 defensive stops in that game as well, so he continues to be disruptive in the run game, 3 tackles for a loss throughout the season. So if you're able to continue to bring some percentage of that and a hefty percentage of that going into where you're looking at like a 6 or a 7% pressure rate as opposed to a 9% pressure rate, then you might have a 4th first-round pick that you're getting back, or effectively feel like you're going to be getting. And it's, again, at a premier position. This is something we haven't seen for the New Orleans Saints, who, during the Sean Payton era, for the most part, invested their top 100 selections outside of premier positions. They went interior offensive line. They went interior defensive line. They looked at, those running backs, safeties, those positions, linebackers ended up being the ones that got the most attention in top 100 selections. But you look at this season, you have a top 100 selection at wide receiver, at left tackle, and at cornerback. You're getting back an injured player at wide receiver, and you're getting back an injured player at edge rusher. That's 5 players that are effectively top 100 talents for you that are coming back in 2022 or joining the team in 2022, all at premier positions. That's huge. That's huge for the New Orleans Saints. And Payton Turner is somebody that, along with Marcus Davenport, has shown that they can be impactful deep into 10-play drives. That they can be impactful on 3rd down, so they can be impactful situationally, and that they can be impactful in the 4th quarter. Now you add a rotation there with all those guys that I mentioned earlier, as well as what the interior defensive line rotation is, and now you have the ability to not only be impactful late in drives, late in snap counts, late in games, but you are going to also be able to be impactful early on in the season, but late in the season as well. So sustained success on the defensive line could hinge on having players like Payton Turner available for the New Orleans Saints in 2022. And that's why I think it's such an impactful thing that Payton Turner is cleared, will be available for training camp, and should be out on the field week 1, either as a rotational player or potentially even in place of Marcus Davenport if he needs more time. Coming up next, which New Orleans Saints need to be, as advertised, non-quarterbacks going into 2022. I'll tell you right now, leading off that list is Michael Thomas. But does he actually need to be 80% of his 2019 record-breaking self? Or is there another year of production that we can look at and pinpoint and say, hey, if he does that, then the New Orleans Saints are in good position? There certainly is. We're going to break all of that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you about our friends over at rockauto.com, the #1 place for you to get everything you need for your vehicle. I broke things down for the do-it-yourselfer yesterday. Let's talk about somebody that's not necessarily a do-it-yourselfer, but you're just looking to save a little bit of money, but you know you need your car to be able to get you from point A to point B, and maybe you don't want to spend $300 on parts and labor over at your local mechanic's shop, right? What I did not so long ago when I needed to replace a side view mirror was I went and I got a quote from a local auto shop, and they gave me a quote of around $300 to order the part, get the part, put the part on the car, switch the part out. I went to rockauto.com. I bought the part for like $60. I went to them and I got just the labor done for $50. So I basically cut my spending in half. You can do that time and time again and save yourself some money with all those auto repart pairs that you need to do, thanks to rockauto.com. So go and check them out, rockauto.com. Let them know that Locked On sent you by writing Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. It's amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available wherever it is that you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. If you're liking what you're watching, if you love supporting the show, all you got to do is subscribe. All you got to do is follow. All you got to do is hit the like button, right? So I appreciate you very much for doing all of that and for being here with us for another episode. Okay, coming up now, I want to talk about the 5 New Orleans Saints non-quarterbacks that need to be as advertised in 2022 in order for the New Orleans Saints to be successful in this season. Now, we could go to the coaching staff here, right? We could talk about Dennis Allen still being a defensive mastermind, despite the fact that his scope has to open up and things like that. But I want to stick to the players for right now, and I want to talk about non-quarterbacks because every team's success hinges on the quarterback, right? When you start 4 quarterbacks in a season, you're usually not a 9-win team. Now, the New Orleans Saints were unique because, as Cam Jordan expressed in his, I believe it was NFL interview that he did yesterday, where he talked about, we found out that not only could the defense impact games, but that they could win games. And that's a big time, that's a big time feeling. Yeah, they were lucky to have that unit, right? That defensive unit to help despite who the quarterback was. But for the most part, your team goes by the way of your quarterback. So for the New Orleans Saints, I wanted to look at non-quarterbacks. So I want to start off with Michael Thomas here. I mentioned that he was going to be the first one we were going to start off with. These aren't really in order of importance. We're just going to break down 2 and then we're going to break down 3 to end the show, just to make it simple. But I wanted to get to Michael Thomas first because there's sort of this, and I'm guilty of it, there's sort of this narrative out there right now that if you get 80% of Michael Thomas in 2019, then you are, in a really, really good place. So what exactly does that mean, like from a numbers perspective? So we know that he had 149 receptions in 2019. What's 80% of that? 119 receptions. He also had 1,400 yards, right? 1,405. So what is 80% of that? Well, that's 1,124. So yeah, if you have a wide receiver that goes out there and gets 119 catches, 1,124 yards, and about 8 touchdowns, then yeah, of course you're going to be in a good place. But is there something else that we can look at that maybe fits the framework a little bit better than sort of throwing out like this percentage and saying like, hey, you're going to do this. And I've been doing this for weeks, right? I've been saying, oh, well, you get 80% of Michael Thomas back, then all of a sudden you're good. 2019 Michael Thomas, and it's like, of course, right? That's 119 catches and over 1,100 yards. That's what you're looking for. In fact, actually, I did the wrong yardage total. Sorry, he had 1,700 yards that season, 1,725. So yeah, so if you get 119 receptions, 1,380 receiving yards, then yeah, of course you're going to be in a really good spot. But here's what I would say. Here's what I'm going to start saying. If you get 2016 Michael Thomas back, 92 catches, 1,137 yards, and 9 touchdowns. If you get that guy back, 75 yards per game, 6 receptions per game, then you're in a really, really good space because of what else you have around the team. Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, Alvin Kamara for the games that he's available, Taysom Hill eventually mixing in with the tight ends, maybe some growth and development from those tight ends, Juwan Johnson, Adam Troutman, and then whoever else rises to the top between guys like Nick Vannett and Lucas Kroll and all them. If you can get the same production that you got from Michael Thomas when he was still developing as a route runner, didn't have far to go, but he was still developing as a route runner, when he was the number 2 option to Brandon Cooks, which allowed you to move on from Brandon Cooks because of how good he was his rookie season, by the by, when he was still making his transition from college to the pros. If you can get that, if this Michael Thomas can produce the way that Michael Thomas did, the least prepared NFL version of Michael Thomas that we've seen because he was a rookie, right? Like, not saying anything cross about him, but he was a rookie coming into the NFL. So therefore he was the least prepared going into that season. He was still learning the scheme. He was still learning the system. He was still learning Drew Brees' language. He was still learning the play calls. Like, he was still learning all that, and he still put up 92 catches and 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. If you can get that guy back, you're in a really, really good place in 2022. So if Michael Thomas can be, quote unquote, as advertised, which doesn't mean going back to his 2019 production as a whole, but that 80% of him, and maybe even less, 92 catches for 1,100 yards, like if you got that from him, I think you'd be very, very happy, and that would mean success for this New Orleans Saints team. Second one I've got for you, safety Tyrann Mathieu. Tyrann Mathieu is and forever will be the definition of versatile in the NFL, right? I mean, the guy can do anything, right? You put his hand in the dirt and have him rush as an interior defensive lineman, and he'll probably generate a pressure for you every now and then. Like, the guy can do anything. And some of that is just attitude, right? You look at CJ Gardner-Johnson, like, there's nothing CJ Gardner-Johnson feels that he can't do. Same thing when it comes to Tyrann Mathieu, and Tyrann Mathieu has shown that over and over again as well. So if you can get that back, right? Not back, but if you can get that and add it to your defensive secondary, your defensive backfield, that's a huge benefit to the rest of your team, and a team that wants to be versatile. You've got Marcus May, who forced the highest incompletion percentage, or had the highest forced incompletion percentage, since 2017. Second on that list was Marcus Williams, by the way. But then he also knows how to play in the box, because Robert Saleh kind of shifted the way that he was utilizing that New York Jets defense once he took over as head coach. So he played in the box a bit. He actually played in the box early on in the 2020 season, then he ended up moving him away further from the line of scrimmage. That's when he started making all of his plays and getting all of his interceptions. So you know he has the ball hawking ability. You know that he also has the ability to play downhill and be an enforcer. Tyrann Mathieu, same thing. He can play away from the line of scrimmage, but he can also play up against the line of scrimmage. He can play in the box. He can come downhill. He can do all those things. CJ Gardner-Johnson, same thing. Guys like PJ Williams, same thing. Guys like Alontae Taylor, eventually same thing. So Justin Evans, same thing. So you have these players all around the secondary that are going to have the ability to play in all of these multiple formats. Tyrann Mathieu has to be the brains of that execution. He has to be the guy that makes the calls. He has to be the guy that relays the information to the secondary, make sure that everybody's set, make sure that everybody's doing what they need to do, and then is communicating during plays, right? You don't want him to have those, there's that TikTok flying around of all the times that he's like putting his hands up while a ball just like kind of goes over his head, and then the deep safety that was supposed to be covering it wasn't covering it. Like, you don't want those moments. And you look at all of the players around that secondary, and really you can pick any of these guys, right? You could say CJ Gardner-Johnson has to play as advertised in order for the Saints to be 2022, because CJ Gardner-Johnson is just that important to the team. But Tyrann Mathieu coming in, being the hometown hero, having a lot of pressure on him, I believe, going into 2022, pressure that he welcomes, right? Coming back home and playing for his hometown team. It's good pressure. It's good pressure. But I think that with all of that, plus him playing the position that he plays, which is safety, which we've seen in New Orleans what happens with bad safety play, because of how much they trust their corners, how much they trust their safeties, right? The system, the scheme needs good safety play. And Tyrann Mathieu has to be not only the person that is going to play the instrument and be somebody that's a part of, the sort of, choreography of what's going on in that secondary, but he has to orchestrate it as well. So I would say Tyrann Mathieu is another person that has to be as sort of advertised, as billed, whatever, in order for the Saints to be successful in 2022, especially at that safety spot. So Michael Thomas, 80% of him from 2019 would certainly be great. 2016 production would be great as well, would be good to have. I think maybe he punches over 100 receptions again, but even still, 92 receptions for 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, like, you're going to take that. So you get that along with Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave and all these other guys. So that ends up being big for you. Then Tyrann Mathieu being the leader, being the communicator, being the orchestrator of that secondary, and having that versatile sort of skill set that he has, and bolstering the versatile skill sets of the players around him. Those two things need to go right. And that would be those guys operating as advertised, right? Being a dominant wide receiver and being the most intelligent player on the field in Tyrann Mathieu. So I think that those two guys, if they are operating as advertised, that's huge for you going into 2022. It doesn't end at just the two of them. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis over on the defensive side, those guys have been dominant over the course of the last stretch of seasons. They'll need to return to that dominance in order for the New Orleans Saints defense to maintain the dominance that it has shown, and therefore allow the New Orleans Saints to continue to win games. We'll break down what all of that looks like as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at BetOnline. They've got the New Orleans Saints favored right now in the Week 1 matchup against the Atlanta Falcons as 5-point favorites on the road. Remember, you're generally given 3 points to be the home team. So really, they look at the Saints as more than a touchdown favorite in this game against the Atlanta Falcons. They also have some odds right now in terms of who will be the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons week 1. The favorite right now is Marcus Mariota, I believe, is at like minus 550. So 50, so pretty good odds that it's going to be Marcus Mariota, but not far behind him, Desmond Ridder at plus 350 last time that I had looked at these. So you can check all of those out and much more just to learn a little bit about what Vegas thinks about the New Orleans Saints week 1 matchup is going to look like, but also you can get in on Rookie of the Year odds, offense and defense. Chris Olave still tied for second right now at plus 900. You can look at win totals, division finishes, MVP. If you want to get into early stuff, you can even get into early things for the first round pick of the 2023 NFL draft. So there's a whole bunch for you to check out over at BetOnline, which you can find on your mobile device, your laptop, wherever it is that you're searching. That's going to be the easiest way to get all of the sports news and trends that you need from the number one source and everything sports gambling information. Go and check them out, BetOnline, where the game starts. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with our final 3 when it comes to the 5 New Orleans Saints that have to perform as advertised in order for the Saints to be effective and to win games in 2022. Let's say to be successful in 2022. So we're going to talk all defense here in this segment because the defense becomes such a big part of what Dennis Allen's system is, what the New Orleans Saints have found in terms of success over the course of the past 5 seasons now. And I'll include 2021 in that. The success that they did find, you look at the 9-0 shutout of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, happened because of their defense, right? Defense and ball control, smart decision-making by the coaching staff, which was led by, yes, Dennis Allen. So, for all the people that say that the Saints can't win with Dennis Allen, they can't win without Sean Payton, they did. So let's chill. Let's wait and see. So I want to break both of these guys down together, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, because they are a key, and then there's one more key, to the dominance of the New Orleans Saints defense, what the New Orleans Saints defense has been, which has been a top 5 scoring defense over the course of the past 2 seasons. Not enough people talk about that. This is a team that was a number 4 scoring defense the year before last, number 5 scoring defense last year, number 5 yardage defense 2 years ago, number 7 total yardage defense last year. That's really good. But we don't talk about that, do we? We talk about Jameis Winston's 30 interceptions. Not we, but you know what I mean, right? Like the narrative around there is Jameis Winston 30 interceptions, 17 years ago. But when you look at the defense has been the piece that has won games for the New Orleans Saints. I tried to, from the top of my head, relay a quote from Cam Jordan, and I completely butchered it. So here's the actual quote. This was him on a visit with Sirius XM NFL radio, where he said, "We realize that defense can not only sustain games, but win games. That confidence is unreal." What's a big part of them sustaining games and also winning games? Well, a big part of it is what they've been able to do in the backfield. So I want to start with Cam Jordan, who of course has had 7.5 sacks in each of the last 10 seasons. That was probably loud, but you deserve it not you deserve it. Cam deserves it. Cam deserves it because that's ridiculous. And not a lot of players have done that. Like a lot of Hall of Famers have done that. Jared Allen did that, but not a lot of players have done that. 7.5 sacks in 10 straight seasons. And remember, people were concerned about Cam Jordan's production early on last season, right? Because he wasn't necessarily the guy that he had seemed that he had looked to be or whatever, right? That we were used to seeing from him. But in 2021, if you look at just sort of his sack production over on defense, he didn't notch his first sack until week 6 against Seattle. And then after that, he went 3 games straight with a sack, no sack for 1 game. Then he went, then he got another sack this one was against Philly. Then he went 2 games without sacks. Then we didn't see him in that Jets game. Remember, that was the first game that he's missed since, forever. And that ended his streak. And then he went off at the end of the season after he was out with COVID, right? He had that, he got upgraded to that 5G. He had a total of 8.5 sacks over the course of the last 4 games. He was ridiculous. 2 sacks against the Bucs, 2 sacks against Miami, 3.5 sacks against Carolina, and then 1 sack against Atlanta because Matt Ryan. So I think that when you look at where the New Orleans Saints defense has been able to find all of its sort of sack production and all of that, I mean, he finished with 12.5 sacks last season, and he didn't have his first sack until the 6th game of the year. Like, that's insane. That's insane. And so when you look at the sack production, sorry, I started a thought. for the New Orleans Saints last season, a lot of it was on the shoulders of Cam Jordan, specifically at the end of the season where they were, wanting you always want to see your team get over that 40 sack threshold, right? You can kind of say 45 sack threshold now if there's an extra game. And so you were watching at the end of the season, Cam Jordan, 2 sacks, 3.5 sacks, and then bam, they were over the 40 sack threshold. So he was a big part of that push. And also just having players available was a big part of that push too. Having David Onyemata back, having Marcus Davenport across from him, all of those things, even though that didn't completely last. But still, I think, you look at all of that and it's just remarkable what it is that Cam Jordan has done. I mean, 7.5 sacks since his second season in 2012. The only season he hasn't hit at least 7.5 sacks was his rookie year where he had a sack. That's insane. That's absolutely insane. And then it goes beyond that too. You want to talk about streaks. There's a pretty impressive one that John Sigler over at Saints Wire, my buddy, shared about Demario Davis. And so we talk about the dominance of Cam Jordan, which is paired with the dominance of Demario Davis. John Sigler here saying linebacker Demario Davis is the only defender in the NFL with 100 plus tackles, 10 plus tackles for a loss, and 3 or more sacks in each of the last 4 seasons. And the only player that's ever done it more than once in that span is one player, Bears linebacker Roquan Smith, who did it twice. 100 plus tackles, 10 plus tackles for a loss, 3 or more sacks in the last 4 seasons. That's what Demario Davis has put together. So if you want a stat line to project for Demario Davis, there's one for you, right? Let's say 105 tackles, 105 sacks would be great too. 105 tackles, let's say 11 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks. Would you be happy with that? Of course you would. Of course you would, because Demario Davis is outstanding, and he's one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL. It doesn't get nearly enough respect, but I'm glad we get to respect him here on Locked On Saints. So I think you get those 2 guys, and you get that production back, 7.5 or more sacks from Cam Jordan on top of that, plus all of the tackles for a loss and the run-stopping ability of Cam Jordan, the run-stopping ability of Demario Davis, their ability to play and take away plays. Like Cam Jordan sometimes makes highlights when all he does is he gets into the passing lane of a quarterback who's looking to dump off to a check down, right? Like that type of wherewithal and understanding that there's a bunch of different ways for you to make plays as an edge defender is what makes Cam Jordan special. And Demario Davis, the same thing about what makes a linebacker special. He has the ability to do all of those things as well. Now, our final one, and again, this isn't really an order of priority. We just want to talk about 5 players here. So the final one that we'll discuss, though, is Marshon Lattimore. And this is going to be really simple and really short, right? Because Marshon Lattimore, there's a quote out there that no position will lose a team games with bad play more than the cornerback position. And thankfully for the New Orleans Saints, they have Marshon Lattimore. But Marshon Lattimore has to play as advertised in 2022. He has to maintain his trend as being a very good lockdown corner on the outside in order for the Saints to find success in 2022. Here's why. Here are the names of receivers that Marshon Lattimore will line up against in 2022. Some of these are top-tier receivers. Some of these are relative unknowns that could turn into top-tier receivers, so on and so forth. He'll open up the season against Drake London and Kyle Pitts, mostly unknown, but still good talent there. Then he'll go on to take on Mike Evans twice in a season, take on DJ Moore twice in a season. He has Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen in London. He's got DK Metcalf / Tyler Lockett against the Seattle Seahawks. He'll go up against Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, right? Those guys over in Cincinnati who will come to New Orleans. DeAndre Hopkins coming back just in time, right? The Saints play the Cardinals in Arizona right as DeAndre Hopkins finishes up his 6-game suspension. Devontae Adams for the Las Vegas Raiders, Cooper Kupp for the Los Angeles Rams, Deebo Samuel potentially for the San Francisco 49ers, and A.J. Brown now, of course, in Philly. So 14 of 17 games, he's playing against top-tier receivers, depending upon how you feel about guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Even if you don't like them, then 12 out of 17 games. And then 2 games you're playing against mostly relative unknowns that are, big-bodied prototypical receivers that are prototypical NFC South receivers that are sure to give you, at least some trouble. Right? So that has to be the big thing that you're looking for. And you have to carry on what you saw last year, because you're going to get plenty of targets in 2021 and in 2022 if you're Marshon Lattimore. And in 2021, just checking my note here, he was tied for the highest forced incompletion percentage of all corners with more than 200 coverage snaps. So he was absolutely insane. He was out of his mind in 2021. And maybe some of the raw numbers don't back up, but when you look at the advanced metrics in terms of what he did and how disruptive he was as a corner, you need to see that again in 2022. in order for the Saints to be successful. Okay, 3 players that I wanted to just mention sort of as honorable mentions. We don't have to go into detail on them, but we will at another time. Ryan Ramczyk, Jarvis Landry, Alvin Kamara, those guys when on the field need to be as advertised as well. Ryan Ramczyk makes perfect sense. Jarvis Landry is the new kind of veteran leader on the offense, or as a new veteran leader on the offense. And then, of course, Alvin Kamara, when he's available, has to be Alvin Kamara. So those are the guys that have to play as advertised in order to be successful, in order for the Saints to be successful in 2022. All right, y'all, coming up in tomorrow's episode, it's Friday, so we'll go in case you missed it, get you caught up on everything that you might have missed around the New Orleans Saints from this week. Then we're going to take an early look as we continue to preview training camp at position battles, get you introduced to some of the position battles that you'll want to keep in mind, including big time battle potentially for cornerback 2, the battle for the left tackle position, and what it is that made JT Gray so special in 2022, and who's going to be the guy lining up opposite him to get the Saints back on track when it comes to punt coverage. So we'll talk about all of that and break it all down in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Saints. And of course, if anything big happens, we'll cover that as well. So we'll be with you here tomorrow. Appreciate you as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Very excited to be able to be here with you. And of course, for your second listen, make sure you go and check out the Locked On NFL podcast. All that you need to know around the NFL in less than 30 minutes, wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Appreciate you, as always, for making me a part of your day. If you see me, say hi. I'll see y'all tomorrow. But if you need anything else between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.